And Shitlord Preachers number 4.
Are we
Fucking
really
A.
going with that? Are we really Shitlord Preachers, man?
I don't know. Are we?
Yeah, it works. It works. I'm not complaining.
Yeah. We've been offline, off-grid, not streaming for the past 3 weeks.
Is it 3 weeks?
Someone parties too much. Yeah, it's been 3 weeks. Someone parties too much.
I was sick. For the record, I was sick.
You were
And
sick once.
I was sick
Then we
twice.
came back.
And then I went to
Then you were
Northern
sick
Ireland.
again. Then
Yeah,
you were
I was
on.
partying. Yeah, it was bad. It was really bad. If anybody's interested, you could find me on Instagram. I got lots of great pictures from Northern Ireland and Newcastle and all these great party locations, but that's a whole other story.
So, lots of shit has happened, dude.
Yeah. Amos,
Way
what
too
the
much
hell's been
shit.
going on in your country, man? Like, you can't keep a lid on this shit, man.
I mean, tiki torches are the hot thing right now.
Yeah, that was the what was it? Charlottesville,
Virginia. So Charlottesville. Well, everyone's already talked about Charlottesville, but
right. Well, we haven't spoke about it. I think it's a good topic.
It's definitely a good topic. So we're kind of changing up the format this time around. We're not doing so much the articles as much because we get a little stuck on those. We just want to just talk really about like kind of the issues. I mean, it's still relevant, current events, but there is just so much going on that getting stuck on just certain articles kind of doesn't. Everyone else is doing that, so the discussion is better, huh?
That's one way to put it. I mean,
right.
In our corner of YouTube, like everybody's doing political commentary and they're covering, the articles and stuff. But I mean, we're good friends. We always have fantastic conversations anyway. So I think that's
without it. We'll just read a couple things here and there, and then it all kind of just forms together in this awesome little messed up conversation about whatever the hell is going on.
Exactly.
So Charlottesville happened.
Well, before that, I think you should introduce yourself for the newcomers, and I'll do the same, and then we'll get into that, man.
Well, I guess we came out of nowhere. No one knows us. My name is Amos Joseph, and this is my friend Brook Potter. We're a couple of guys that have known each other for a few years now, and I'm in Minnesota. Brook over there is in London, England, and what we're doing here is just basically talking about a lot of the things that are going on, some current events, some politics, maybe throw in just some philosophical discussions maybe every now and then. I don't know. We try not to get too deep, but this is just us having, sharing with you guys the conversations we have about pretty much anything that's going on. Kind of just watch us talk about what we're seeing, why we think things are happening the way they're happening, get our thoughts on the issues, right?
Pretty much. I mean, I can't really add to that. So for those who don't know, my name is Brook Potter. I'm on here. I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago. I know I don't sound like it, and sometimes I don't look like it. But yeah, I'm out here in the UK. I moved out here recently. Forgive me for the mess in the background. As Amos already pointed out, I've been traveling a lot. Just got back from a couple trips, and I'm just trying to get my life back to order. And part of that is returning to the streams, which I have actually missed, Amos. I regret that we haven't been doing this more often. So right. With that, yeah, tell me about this, your perspective on this Charlottesville thing.
So,
because we don't really fully understand it out here in the UK.
So basically, from what I've read and everything, for those of you who are joining us and kind of want a little perspective on it. So Richard Spencer, a very well-known, if you want to call white supremacist, not so much, just he's basically, I'd say, because white supremacist seems really strong, but the man is basically from what I've read, is a very strong white nationalist, someone who believes in these, very strong ideals of sort of voluntary separation of a white ethno-state. So what does that mean? That's basically is he, you know, with everything that's going on in this country and a lot of these refugees that are moving in across the West, specifically in Europe right now, and I mean just in general with the rise of interracial marriage, none of which are bad things. I mean, I want that to be quite clear that I don't subscribe to the views of Richard Spencer. I'm just explaining his views. I am the antithesis of what he believes, being half Asian, half American, well, half white, half Asian. So, yeah, he wants this voluntary ethno state, and he's sort of become the poster boy of this alt-right movement of this, which I don't even think is. I mean, we'll just say alternative movement, because further down in the discussion, there's also what's known as the alt-left. That's become a term, and they both have. But the thing is that the alt-right and the alt-left both have actually very left-leaning views. So, so basically, he was invited to speak at this rally, sort of for their cause, for people who are white nationalists, white supremacists, possibly even some Nazis too, just neo-Nazis. That a lot of that kind of got all mixed together. Anything from the hardcore neo-Nazi, white supremacist, racist, to the more lighter, not so hard-leaning, just white nationalists, or just, I mean, really just people that were concerned about the state of the white race. So for those of you who maybe think that it was just a whole bunch of there's literally millions of Nazis in this country, I think from what I've heard, there were only like a few hundred people at this event, and most of which weren't even really that hard line on the issue. So, I mean, there was the whole. So the group had signed on to bring Richard Spencer out to speak at this rally. They actually got like a permit from the mayor of Charlottesville. They went through the proper procedures to basically say, we're going to get together, we're going to have this peaceful sort of gathering. Everything was kosher legally. Right. And what had happened was the police were expected to step in and keep the peace, and they didn't. Now, there's this, just to really, really break this down, the people holding this rally did, in fact, from what I've read, they did bring weapons, they did bring things to essentially defend themselves, because having views like that, you gotta be careful. Now, the narrative now is that they went there looking for a fight, trying to incite violence. Their ideology is inherently violent, but what we're going to kind of talk about here is what I talked to Brook about was, from what I've seen and all the angles I've looked at, they went there definitely looking at, expecting violence, but they were not the ones that started it.
Right. So who were the agitators on the other side? Who is this alt-left?
The Black Lives Matter and Antifa groups had basically shown up, and since the police did not step in to keep them separated, keep them from going at each other, no barriers, nothing, they just surrounded them and went in, and if you guys watched some of the videos, you definitely saw the Dodge Challenger that charged and killed someone. Right. You see a lot of stuff that's happened. I think three people died, 20, 30 people injured or something out of the few hundred. Definitely not cool at all. I mean, the whole thing just went south quick. And this is where it got really tricky, because, and I totally agree. I mean, both views from those two sides. You have the BLM, Black Lives Matter, Antifa side, and then you have the white supremacist, white nationalist, neo-Nazi side. Basically, they clashed. Both ideologies have major flaws, I think, for what they both do. But I think in the to really be to look at the fairly, to look at objectively. One side started it, one side threw the first punch, and the other side was ready to take that punch, and that's what led to what happened.
Right.
So the country kind of went nuts because Trump didn't really say anything specific about it right away. From what I saw, he said something right away, definitely, condemning the violence. But then it took 2 full days for him to actually come out and say and address it specifically. And the mainstream media, the left and the mainstream media, essentially flipped out. They said ridiculous that he didn't actually address it. CNN, MSNBC, they didn't like the fact that he didn't say anything right away. But then he did say something. They still didn't like it because he looked at it and said there's violence on many sides.
Right. Which is
true. He basically said, yeah, which is totally true. I mean, he could have gone further, maybe tried to figure out like who started it, but then that would get into semantics because people don't really care who started it.
I mean, I think he did though. I mean, no, I haven't fully followed it, but I do recall that he did like a Q&A after the session, and he was the one who kind of coined.
No, I think I remember that.
Yeah, and he kind of said, well, what about these people who came charging in?
Yeah, so, and I even watched interviews with people who were on the ground, kind of there to report on what was going on. And some of these people, they were interviewed by a few alternative media sources to see, okay, what happened. And from what it sounded like, it really was the alt-left. They threw the first punch. So Trump calls this out and basically says it is what it is. He says, many sides, there's violence. And he basically said, he called out, the KKK, alt-right, white supremacists, white nationalists. None of it's cool. It's all bad. This goes against our values as Americans. And the champion of the mainstream media, of the left, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, were thrown into that, and people did not like that.
So is it that the people didn't like it, or just the media didn't like?
Mainly the media didn't like it, but since the media says it, people tend to follow that narrative.
Sure. I mean, so, just to kind of add on that from like our perspective out here, it's I was probably talking to some chicks during all of this madness in the Dirty Onion in Northern Ireland, so I missed a lot of this coverage. But yeah, I mean, the Antifa or the Black Bloc that's out here in Europe is very different to what you guys have out there. And we had it in France for I think it was either France or no, it was Germany, Hamburg, for the G20. And it's a very different thing. The Antifa that's out here, they're very violent and very aggressive and stuff like that. And it's mobs of people, thousands upon thousands that show up for these kinds of protests. So when I was hearing about this, excuse me, I tried to follow up with I watched probably James Alsop. I don't know if that was the one you saw.
Yep. So for those of you who don't know James Alsop, James Alsop is a YouTuber who's been called a white supremacist alt-right person. But what's funny is if you look into his profile, he's actually, I think, part Korean or something.
Yeah, he's well. Yeah, I think that's Tim Pool. Tim Pool is the one who's half Korean, half white.
James Alsop is also part Asian in some way,
Yeah, he is part Asian as well, yeah. But I think you might be mixing up the two of them.
So you look at this and it's like, well, they obviously can't be all right, and they can't be. So they went there, and I think he would fit in a category more so of he understands the concerns of the alt-right, sort of the loss of heritage of the specifically European white racial identity, I guess. But he tends to remain very objective when he comes to his videos and talking about things like identity politics. And just to really touch on that quick is the thing about the alt-right is that I think it's more so a reactionary movement to the left the
Yeah, like
left's
the racial
idea of
identity
racial identity.
politics. Yeah. Whoa, Amos, did we lose you, man? Oh, it looks like we lost Amos. All right, so I'm just going to fill in for a minute here. I don't know if we're going to get him back. I know he's been having internet problems for a while. From what I understand, he's supposed to be hardwired into his modem. I don't know what's going on with that, so maybe he's having some issues. But like I was saying, I watched the James Allsup review of this, as well as the coverage by Tim Pool. Tim Pool is one of these independent reporters on YouTube. One of the guys who actually still does journalism rather than pushing a narrative or shilling for the big corporations and the corporate media and that kind of thing. And I mean, they were definitely concerned about the Nazi paraphernalia. I think they saw a couple like Nazi flags and probably people doing some salutes, and the blood and soil chant. They were saying blood and soil in English, which is part of the German chant that was used back in the rallies for the Nazis and stuff like that. So yeah, there was definitely some concerns, but as Amos was pointing out, if I understand it right, they were kind of peacefully doing their thing. The police were supposed to separate the different groups to keep them from violence. The police apparently didn't do their job. And as much as they were there and they're controversial, at least in my perspective, they had a right to be there. And I think even the left-leaning ACLU, I think it's the Americans Center for Law and something, I can't remember what it stands for, but they're free speech advocates. And originally when this group had come out and petitioned to do this march and so forth, they were denied. And the ACLU actually took the case and made the case that no, this is free speech. They're allowed peaceably assemble is part of the rights ascribed in the Constitution. So if it is that they were permitted and so forth, and there have been some reports that the police did not hold up their end, that they got some reports that they were given instructions to stand down and other things. But yeah, it resulted in chaos. And that's kind of, with the likes of Tim Pool and James Allsup and these guys, they reported from the inside. And yeah, everybody's concerned about the Nazi paraphernalia, apparently. But there weren't a lot of them. Like, we don't have exact numbers, but from what I understand, it was very few. And I think there were even a couple videos of people like the alt-right side circling a couple of these protesters with their torches and everything. But there was no violence. They didn't do anything with them. They just kind of circled around them and kind of left them, to agitate and scream and do whatever. So there's a lot of confusion, and the narrative coming out from the mainstream media has been just absolutely deplorable, which is, again, because I didn't have a lot of time, I don't actually know too much about it. But Amos and I have had a good discussion about this pertaining to free speech. Welcome back, Amos.
Fucking internet, seriously. I got a hard line and everything, and this thing just kicked out. Basically, yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of what went down once, because I really did not want to touch on this, at least on my on my Facebook and stuff like that, and talk to people about it. Yeah, I talked to people on the side about it, but just because I knew right away if I said anything to sort of validate the statements of Donald Trump, because the man actually kind of was on point with the whole, calling out all sides. I mean, it's like
sides, yeah.
Right. Because it's like, yeah, both sides were fucking around doing a bunch of, projecting these ideas that really aren't the best, that really go against a lot of what makes America great and stuff like that. And then violence ensued. I mean, you have two. I brought it down to kind of saying, like, because there was the whole argument that, what do you mean there's like there can't be multiple sides to hatred, there can't be two sides of hatred. And it's like, no, it's not about how many sides of hatred, like, hatred and not hatred. It's Antifa, which completely defies their own name by having very fascist ways of projecting their message. I think was a CNN that said Antifa is an organization that wants to promote peace through violence.
Right. Yeah, I saw that shit, man. It's like CNN has lost the plot. Oh, for fuck's sake, Amos. Sort out your internet, man. We've lost Amos again.
No, we didn't.
Oh, what happened? What happened? Did it freeze?
It probably did. I don't know.
Oh my god. Okay, good.
So
go ahead, man.
Here was what happened. So then I was like, okay, I'm gonna look up like just something. So I find Southern Poverty Law Center, left-leaning website, right? Really left-leaning website.
Yeah, and symbols are racist and shit.
Southern Poverty Law Center talks about Richard Spencer, has a pretty decent profile on him, which is good, And they basically said, hey, Richard Spencer is someone who actually eschews violence. He avoids it. So he's become sort of this poster boy of the alt-right and stuff like that. So it's just funny. Like even the left-leaning people have admitted to say like the guy doesn't like violence. So then I posted this profile on my Facebook, and some people were like, "Oh, okay, this is good info." And I said, these are left-leaning people that commented, "Hey, this is good info." And I said, "Well, I think it's really interesting that the man is actually like anti-violence." And then people were like, and that's just like that's probably clicking around in people's heads, like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, no." Some people were even telling me they were having discussions with people, and people were saying, well, the alt-right is inherently violent. There's no such thing as peaceful rallies with the alt-right.
I mean, I don't know of that many alt-right rallies to begin with to say. And if they've had rallies before this and there's no news coverage, I would assume they were all like peaceful and...
I mean, if you go find on YouTube, you go and try to find like Richard Spencer videos, you don't see people just in there with guns and weapons and just he's just out there sharing his views. He's, speaking at events and stuff, and you don't hear about you might hear about protests, but you don't see him actively like, okay, any black person, Asian person, Jew that comes in here, we're just going to like beat the shit out of them or something.
Right.
So, I mean, I really tried not to like really touch on this and like actively talk about it. I talked about things like, well, ideologies, what was it? You can have extreme ideologies and everything, but the moment you throw a punch, you're wrong, regardless. And what happened with BLM and Antifa against the rally in Charlottesville, I don't care if they're anti-fascist, which is in principle anti-fascist. Okay, yeah, that's a good thing. You're anti a political ideology that uses violence to promote its agenda.
Right.
But they do it through violence. So they're not truly anti-fascist. So
who was it that said that? Somebody actually, was it George Orwell or one of those guys, said that there are two types of fascists. There's the fascist and then there's the anti-fascist. And yeah, like, no, he really said, there is a quote. I will have to find that, right? I don't know if you could pull it up and do a search for it and stuff like that.
Right.
But what you say about the non-violence thing is very interesting. Because I never really heard about Richard Spencer much before this. I mean, I've heard a couple of YouTubers comment on a couple of his views. He's demonized basically by everybody. I knew about him from when he got punched at some rally. I think it was just after the Trump protests. Trump just got elected. It was the Women's March, and then there was the Trump protest, and he was there and he got punched. And I looked at a couple of his videos, and this is, a lot of people do not know what a white nationalist is and what the agenda of a white nationalist is. And for the large part, it's seeking a voluntary separation. They're not looking to, physically deport and move people out. Now, I'm sure there are some white supremacists that want that.
Definitely, yeah.
But from the few clips that I've heard of him and stuff like that, he's not advocating for that. he's hoping for some kind of voluntary sort of system, which is
Right.
very different from, maybe the KKK or any of these other people. Not that I'm defending the views of Richard Spencer. I give a shit about Richard Spencer, right? Because much
Right.
like Amos, I am very much mixed, even though I look like, as Caucasian as they come, right?
Right,
But
right. We're both very, if you want to call it, in touch with just multicultural, heritage, our multicultural heritages, and I mean, Brooke and I we've traveled a lot. We've dealt with we know about a lot of different cultures, and I'm gonna really talk about this too because it. I had some people. So when I said I didn't want to touch on some of this stuff. I didn't want to go anywhere near it, or it just people were posting things on my through my news feed, and I just made very small, very subtle comments that kind of, just pivot the conversation just a bit. And I mean, wearing this hat.
Yeah, according
Which
to
I'm gonna.
that's a hate symbol, right? That's like a white supremacist
Oh yeah,
flag you've got. Yeah,
it is. But see, this is this. For those of you who don't know, so
you can explain
this is a
Pakistan.
parody. I'm gonna explain Kekistan. This is a parody. People the people think the alt-right is actually trying to hijack this because the reason, and for those of you who are seeing it are thinking, okay, it looks like a Nazi flag, and
Right.
it's done that way on purpose to parody identity politics. So the movement of Kekistan is this fictional nation of that has basically created itself to be the most oppressed people in human
Right.
history, like 20 or 30,000 years of oppression, since the beginning of man, kind of thing. And it's a joke on identity politics. It's a joke on the left. It's a joke. It's a parody.
Well, a joke of the left and the right at this point. I mean, the alt-right
right.
wouldn't
It's a
necessarily
joke on
appreciate
identity
either.
politics primarily.
Yeah.
And identity politics is being adopted by the alt-right and such. So people are saying, oh, it's a subverted Nazi flag. It's like, no. In the world we are in today, you wave a Nazi flag. You don't wave a subverted flag. You just either you are or you aren't. So there's a reason I don't if I was truly so this is where it went.
Right.
So someone was asking about because the whole Charlottesville exploded. Someone I saw posted a article about this. There's a black man he was part of some documentary. What he did was he went around and started making friends with KKK members. And as a result,
with the white supremacists,
white supremacists. Yep. So he made friends with them, and he had actually been the result of hundreds of members of the KKK leaving over the years.
Yeah.
So I saw someone post this. I'm like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. Like, this is a good thing. It's actually a good thing and should be seen as such and just be appreciated. Like, this is awesome what this guy is doing. So then I start seeing comments like, well, you can't win with the left. So you had all sorts of comments. You had comments that were saying, well, this gives white people like nothing to do, because if a black man is doing it, that takes responsibility off the white man. Why does a black man have to do it? And it's like, what? And then it turned into like, well, this is ridiculous. Like, well, why, just narrative after narrative after narrative that had to get shoved in there to say, this isn't quite good. Basically,
really
shit on the whole thing.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen that. I think it's a video, and there's been articles written about it. I thought it was phenomenal. I mean, that's always been my philosophy of.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Yeah,
on the person's page.
Shit on that. Wow.
On the person's page, they didn't shit on the guy itself. They just shit on the idea, saying like, we got to be careful when we praise this because all these ramifications and all these consequences. And it's like, so I commented on, I said, I think it's ridiculous that I come into a thread like this where something genuinely good is happening.
Right.
And everyone is just my narrative, my narrative, my narrative.
For fuck's sake, man. I had no idea.
So then someone replied and said, oh, you with the subverted Nazi flag in your profile are going to tell us about silencing our narratives. That's exactly what you want, isn't it? I'm like,
brilliant.
So I had
people would do that to me.
I had to point out I am the absolute antithesis of any Nazi ideology, of a purebred human, let alone, you know.
That's crazy.
I mean,
I didn't even see that. I would have loved to see that. I would have jumped on that immediately.
So I was called a Nazi at that point, basically. So then we come to another conversation, and this is the one you and I talked about.
Right.
Someone I knew very well had posted something about there was an article, I guess, about someone. Oh, it was like a news reporter, black lady, went onto the property of a very proud KKK member. Now people get all like, you know, KKK members, like they don't really wear their hoods anymore. So this guy's there with the hood kind of pulled back, and he said this was the first time in 20 years he allowed a black person on his property.
Right.
And this lady sat down and interviewed him, talked about, you know, his views. I mean, he was having a hard time. Like, they're real and they're bad.
Sure. I completely agree. But I mean, I don't know if they're bad, but the ideas that they're spouting are toxic. And
right.
Sometimes you don't know where it's come from. So I'm very cautious to label anybody as bad.
Right, because like that's
misguided.
Interesting
sure.
too. So no, you bring up another good point too. Is the left will sit here and talk about all day about the oppression of minorities and the marginalized, and sort of use that and to say, well, they're making these choices because of their past, but they won't give that to any people who are extreme in the white race.
Right.
And so this person posted this article and was saying, you know, this is ridiculous, you know, because Trump obviously didn't mean what he meant with his statements and this and that and the other. Basically saying,
what statements? What statements?
The statements about Charlottesville. Like he didn't really mean
right.
What he said about the like. So this person can read Donald Trump's mind, of course.
Right. So he was commenting on Donald Trump's response to Charlottesville. What is it, Charlieville or Charlottesville?
Charlottesville. So he was commenting on the statements,
right,
saying that basically Trump has friends that are white nationalists, neo-Nazi. Like this is his group. Like he would never really speak against them, so he didn't really mean it. So I just commented
and of course,
one sentence.
There's no way for him to know that.
So I commented one sentence. But he did condemn them, didn't he? All I said.
Correct. Yeah.
And
what happened? It was a shitstorm. Oh my goodness, people are too crazy for words.
Like they were like, I pity you for trolling on my page. You're ridiculous. How could you say you need to understand that the KKK are not your friends, especially someone like you who is not white. And I'm like,
how do you go from that statement to the KKK being your friends?
Like thinking I want to be friends with the KKK. I don't know that I'm not white enough. And then he makes a comment about me not being able to read.
Really?
You know, for reasons I don't quite understand. I don't know, man.
Your Chinese eyes?
I don't know.
Oh, that's
not white enough. So went on talking about all this, and it turned into a personal attack when from what I've learned, I just this is for those of you guys who want to look into some material here. Ben Shapiro has a really good video on the 10 ways to debate a leftist. And one of which was, if they make a personal attack, you call them out on it and you use their tactics for themselves, and you use facts to throw in there too. So I basically said, you're calling me a KKK member, which can be summed up as one thing only: you're an asshole.
Correct.
That's just it. You call someone a racist, let alone a KKK member, is the worst thing you can say in terms of character attack. You're saying that to someone, and that's your argument, and you have zero evidence of the case. That is the worst thing in an argument. Like, that's just stupid. So I said that, being this is someone that's very well respected in their community and such, there was all sorts of people kind of jumped on it and saying, I'm being rude, I'm not respecting my elders, stuff like that. And I mean, this person basically said, I've been attacked. Like, he wrote a full page, like, I've been attacked, you're just like this person, someone who I've looked up to quite a bit, that he compared me to this person, saying, you're like this, they were just like this. Someone who was a little more right-leaning than I am. And it just like, it really pissed me off. Like, it's amazed me that in the past, the past year, really, it started really 9 months ago, pretty much leading up to the election. People that you think people that you were friends with, people that you even were totally okay with to be in disagreement on so many political issues and so much of, you were okay with having I was totally cool having discussions with people and in total disagreement on some really touchy issues.
Sure.
And like close friends, good acquaintances, some people like that, and just, they cut you out. They think the absolute worst of you right now. The political climate in the U.S. has completely been polarized almost to the max, to where where you either are anti-Trump or you're for Trump. You can't be in between. You can't defend anything he says without sounding like you support him. And if you support him, you might as well be a neo-Nazi, KKK, white supremacist. And we don't care if you fit any of those criteria in the slightest. You just are.
That's crazy.
The left will say, they claim to just know exactly who you are, what you are, and they call you the worst of it.
That is the toxic nature of identity politics. And in the UK, it's a little different, but not far off.
Right.
Like I shared a quick story about during the election. They had the door campaigners come around and stuff like that. So I met with both a conservative as well as a Labour. So we don't have Republicans and Democrats. We have conservative, which would kind of be associated with the Republicans. And we have Labour, which is more left, which would kind of be like the Democrats.
But you're all just socialists. I'm just
kidding. We don't really have a right in the UK. We have just a less left. That's kind of how it is. But I will never forget. I was talking to the Labour MP, member of Parliament for our constituency, and I was telling her I was undecided and all this other stuff. And I'll never forget what she said to me. She said, if you hate the Conservatives, vote for Labour. And I just kind of, it was a statement that so resonated. Like, I don't hate anybody. Like, how is politics, degraded into this vitriol of hatred?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is such a strong word, And she had no problem saying it. It's just like, hate the Conservative. Like, why would I hate anybody? I don't hate. I might hate ideas. I think ideas can be terrible.
Mm-hmm.
People can be deceived by ideas, but that's very different than me saying I hate a group of people. And I'm sorry to hear that's happening across there as well. It's actually quite discouraging that this is the level of discord. Now, both you and I have come from a background where we've dealt with disagreements, all kinds of levels and all kinds of areas and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for the most part, at least, I I think for both of us, we've kind of prided ourselves in, yeah, we separate the person from the ideas. And we'll always have, a respect for the person as an individual, even though we disagree with them. And both you and I have a mutual friend who's very much like that, very left, and on the fringes. But we love him as a brother. He's like a very good friend of both of us.
Right.
It's unfortunate that most people in politics now can't seem to do that, and that's worrying. That's really worrying.
It's also really concerning when it's because we're talking about our mutual friend here. He would probably like to assume we're just the absolute worst, but we've also had enough history with this guy that he knows better, right?
Correct.
Now we've probably got a whole bunch of people who are sort of lesser on that level of friendship that are left leaning that will literally just think we're the most worthless pieces of shit on the planet.
I mean, remember I had a conversation, I think one of those times you were stirring the pot and you posted something about abortion and, your views on abortion and stuff like that.
Well, just a little bit of context. So,
right. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I still believe choice is definitely an important thing in terms of freedom, being libertarian. Not that just because I'm libertarian I have to be pro-choice, but I think choice is definitely an important thing, and I'm not going to go and judge what people do. However, I think it's important for people to be educated and understand, okay, what is life and when does it start? And I just said, hey, I would like some of you using the premise that. So we started breaking down, okay, what is life? When does life begin? Okay, I just said, well, life begins at conception. Okay, so we established that. I said, to get into the philosophical argument of when life actually starts, I just said, no, we can't sit here and play subjective games of when life starts. It just starts at conception. Let's just leave it at that instead of play around with the idea. I said, so I just think, can you rationally, logically prove that abortion is okay?
Right.
In terms of just killing someone. And it just
exploded. There was shit everywhere. It was like on the ceiling, on the floor, up your nose. It was terrible.
I mean,
we're not getting into the abortion debate, but
no,
I do recall that. Right. That's a whole other podcast. And just for the record, I am personally pro-life, but I respect people's choice, right?
Right.
You do you.
We're kind of the same on that.
Our philosophy. Yeah. So if ever I was in a position where I had an unwanted pregnancy, I would choose life. If somebody else is in a different circumstance, I do not have the right to tell them anything. They make their own mind. But the reason I brought this up was because we did have another less familiar mutual friend that did jump onto that conversation. And she was literally suffering from the brain syphilis, right? Her brain clearly was not in its functioning right mind. And the comments that she was making at that time were just so superfluous. Even I had to jump on. Now, I'm very rock back. I don't like to really get into these internet arguments simply because I know there's no point to it. You cannot really, right? Even if you make a point, even if you convince them, they will never admit it, at least not in public. Now, they might think about it in their private time, which is why I still engage in the conversations and I try to make good points.
Right.
But they'll fight till the last, right? They'll just keep going. And, this mutual friend of ours and stuff like that, I basically insulted her and called her a moron and, suffering from the brain syphilis and other things.
Okay, yeah.
That person, right. I figured I had to highlight it.
Which is someone that doesn't really talk to me ever anymore.
That was the point I was getting to. That was the point I was getting to. That so after I kind of took a couple shots at her and whatever, even one of my friends jumped on, totally out of context, but I had a conversation with him offline. As a result of that conversation, she actually stopped talking to you.
Yeah.
Which I thought was.
I even tried to reconcile. I mean, I called her, texted her, and all this, and basically it came down to And this is, I mean, very left-leaning individual, and just kind of was saying, I mean, with everything that's just brought up some of my personal life, which wasn't too out of line until it was sort of thrown into this mix to say, well, you know, I just think it really sucks that you now have these really shitty views because of shitty situations that have happened in your life. That's called victim blaming, and they're not supposed to do that if they're on the left.
So
Victim shaming.
because you've explain what victim shaming is, right? So because you've had a hard knock life,
Yeah.
your perspective is skewed, and they're basically saying your opinion doesn't matter. That's what she's saying.
Right. I mean, it's just like it's because any shaming, victim shaming, slut shaming, fat shaming, body shaming, it's all sort of shaming you for certain decisions or certain things that have happened to you in a way and how you reacted to them, and basically saying, well, it's, you know, like rape shaming is basically saying, well, you're shaming someone, you know, in a victim shaming in the context of rape, is saying, well, you were asking for it by dressing that way, or you weren't being safe, which is totally not cool, I think. But when you start conflating, like you start mixing in, like, well, you know, you've had shitty stuff happen in your life, because this person knows a lot of, he said, because of all this stuff that's happened to you is skewed my views, and it's like, no. My views are constantly changing and constantly moving along. Someone like Brooke comes along and confronts me and says, these views are don't really make sense because this and this. And I go, oh, so I think about this. Definitely there's influence from my life, but you don't like everyone's views. Like, you're basically you're shaming someone for the bias they have because of their life. It's like everyone has that.
Sure. Everybody's got circumstances and problems and issues. That doesn't mean that their views are not valid. Exactly.
Right. They like, and so it was unfortunate that this person and I don't really talk ever since then. And I really don't see any reason to do so. It just, there's even other friends that that I have, mutual friends between this person and I, that I see engage in conversation, because I wasn't blocked on Facebook. I was just unfriended. Right. So I'll see in other forms of social media where we are connected, that I see these conversations that happen, and it's the same thing. People basically, right. I mean, there was one on 4th of July about how patriotism doesn't make any sense, and someone tried to confront her on that, and it was just, you know, spewing brain syphilis all over again. So,
fuck that brain syphilis, man. It's the worst.
Brain AIDS, brain syphilis.
Brain AIDS, man. And
what you
mean by that, of course, is like, you know, the very leftist ideologies. That's basically
leftist echo chamber ideology. I really believe is rooted in some sort of mental illness.
I would completely agree.
I mean, you're at such a point where discourse has to be resolved through violence or name calling or personal attacks.
Yeah.
You've lost. I mean, that's the, you can't, you just, they think that they can end they do end the argument when they throw out a personal attack, or they do character, you know, but they actually lose the argument altogether at that point. You stop it because you crossed that line, but you lost, because you can no longer have the discourse. When you call someone a racist, when you call someone a bigot, transphobic, homophobic,
Republican.
And that's a thing too, is this sort of anti-third wave feminist, anti-SJW sort of ideology is seen as hard right ideas, but no, it's just, you gotta have. They just come into these discussions not really clear-headed.
Correct.
No level-headed.
I mean,
they're not, you know.
Yeah, that's. I mean, the left in a lot. I mean, not in everything, but in most things. It's supposed to be a compassionate movement, and it's very much about the feelings and all this other kinds of stuff. But at the end of the day, it doesn't always reflect in the reality. And what's disturbing for me is the amount of propaganda, like the amount of length that they're going to try and get fake statistics and skewed studies. And I mean, I read a report recently about the job situation in Washington State after they raised the minimum wage. And it was found out that the mayor's office paid to have another study to discredit like the University of Washington study that was saying this has become a problem. And they're using politics and everything else to try and create, as you say, this echo chamber. And unfortunately, most people don't give a shit, right? Most people, like I know Lauren Southern did a video about this, of which you responded as to why we're not winning the bigger argument. Like we're not penetrating the bigger social narratives that are taking place. And the reason for that is very simple, right? Most people are not interested in politics. They're not, they're not trying to, make a point. They're not interested in Antifa and, if Milo Yiannopoulos is speaking or whatever. They're just trying to live their life. And they're going to read their newspapers. They're going to vote every 4 or 5 years in an election and stuff. But they're more concerned about, getting the dishes done and the kids off to soccer practice or, kung fu or whatever it is.
Right. And anything that really comes into that picture, because we talk about the, what caused Trump to win. And it was an alienation from the left of those individuals that we're talking about here, the everyday man that really hears someone like Trump talking really, speaking his mind, so to speak. I mean, is it always the best thing that he's doing to speak his mind? Of course not. I mean,
probably not.
The man says really stupid stuff.
Yeah.
But because they saw someone that was just like, I don't give a fuck, they're like, hey, here's a politician that's he's breaking a mold. And then the left came in and was like, people that are going to vote for you, people that even think about liking you, are a bunch of racist, homophobic, transphobic bigots, and the whole thing, deplorables. And then they were like, well, fuck those people. We're just going to vote for this guy. I mean, that's really what it is.
Yeah. This is what created Richard Spencer. And this is what created, the alt-right and all of these kind of nationalist, racist groups. You cannot have the identity politics on one side and not expect a backlash in some capacity. You can't.
Right.
It has to happen.
Yeah.
So this is the direct result. The left created this.
Right.
Crazy.
This is the political climate that has been created by the left. I think they got so comfortable having, hey, we've got our guy in for 8 years, and we've got this woman that is very establishment, and she seems good, and let's get her in there too. And then they doubled down on thinking they're not going to fail, and fuck, they did. I mean, now they fail. I mean,
the Trump election was the biggest fuck you to the left.
Oh yeah, I mean, and they were the biggest fuck you to themselves, because they were like, we're gonna double down on Hillary. I mean, to the point that they got caught with their pants down with the whole Bernie Sanders nonsense.
Yeah,
and they were just like, fuck all, because Bernie Sanders, as much as he wasn't, he's no Donald Trump by any means. He's no man, the regular man, but he still had ideas that were very much, I want to give all of you all this stuff. Granted, as much as I don't agree with his socialistic ideas, the man was appealing.
The man had integrity.
The man appealed to the people. He was appealing to people. He was basically and by shutting him out, they were like, well, this is a bit like, they're a bunch of frauds. They're a bunch of fakes. They're frauds. We're gonna vote for this guy.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
So, I mean, I think this is kind of old news at this point, but a lot of people just don't get, like, why is he in the White House? The left is still, like, spinning, their heads are still spinning, like, how is he still there? Russians, yeah. I was actually thinking about something the other day, and I was going to tell you, we didn't talk about this. God, I really actually do wish the Russians interfered and made Gary Johnson president.
Wouldn't that have been cool?
Yeah.
That would have been epic. We should have written a letter, you know, like, dear Putin, if you are going to mess with the U.S. elections, please give us Gary Johnson.
Yeah. I think they don't. And then the Charlottesville was really just a break in Russia coverage.
Yeah, the Russia story has disappeared. I guess,
Yeah.
you know.
But it'll probably come back next month.
I mean, the media just has no integrity in this coverage at all. And I mean, unfortunately, most people are just getting it from the one side, so they don't know. But like for persons like yourself and myself in the internet culture, who've been kind of following these fights and these disagreements, and you know, like the Antifa, the Milo Yiannopoulos, and the Ben Shapiro, you know, university riots and other things. We're a little more, for want of a better word, informed about what's going on. But yeah, CNN is tanking. Like, if you don't know, the ratings for CNN are so bad that the kids channel Nickelodeon is doing better than them, right? And
I mean, they were already doing bad. On top of, and then they pull the, for those of you, I think this had to have been during the time we were kind of off the air, was the CNN blackmail thing.
The blackmail. Oh, was that the 4chan
with
guy?
The meme,
right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Reddit.
We didn't cover that one. Yeah.
Was
Reddit? Yeah, that was
the individual known as Han Asshole Solo.
Han Asshole Solo. Yeah.
The individual on Reddit who possibly, maybe, we don't even know, created the GIF, whatever you want to call it, of Donald Trump wrestling down the CNN logo. Someone superimposed CNN logo, and then I think we did talk about that. Yeah, and then InfoWars put out like a $20,000 contest to make a meme.
Oh yeah, we did cover that. We did cover that.
But I mean, you see these big. You see the left and their news media outlets are basically doubling down on everything, and they're still doing that.
Yeah.
They're doubling down on just alienating a chunk of the country. I'm not going to go and say the majority. And then they're saying, like, well, you know, half the country, it wants to kill the other half because one half is peace-loving anti-fascists who just want socialism, communism in the best way possible, because obviously it's never been tried anywhere else. And then the other side is a bunch of hate-mongering, fear-mongering, war-mongering, super capitalists that just want to kill the other side, who are a bunch of racist white people, and they just hate the other side. I was actually watching a movie yesterday, Brooke.
A movie? You had time for a movie? Wow.
I did. Well, I was watching a movie, and there was a character in the movie who it was like sort of like a younger kids movie. It was actually a Nickelodeon movie back when they made movies. So it was there was a character in there. There was a girl who was a character, and she was a foreign exchange student from Venezuela. And I just sat back. This is from 2002, the movie. So I'm sitting here like, holy shit! Are they in for a surprise? I mean, shit was already going south in Venezuela back then with the whole. I mean, socialism was happening, but it was not like it is now, where most of the country is starving. But at least they're all thin, right?
Maybe they don't have a lot of feminists. That's why. Feminism hasn't reached Venezuela, apparently.
But guess how you solve that? You raise minimum wage.
And they have, which hasn't worked. They raised it to like 20 or 50 bolivars, and it still hasn't worked.
The bolivar is more worthless than World of Warcraft money.
Yeah, that says a lot. In fact, I've done a couple of videos on that. You know, if anybody's interested, check my channel. But yeah, and to this day, even out here, Jeremy Corbyn, who is the leader of the Labour Party out here, he actually praised the likes of Castro in Cuba and Hugo Chavez and Maduro Maduro in Venezuela. And they still haven't recanted that. They're actually still praising these people, like, you know, thank you for these people for showing that, you know, a country can distribute wealth, and, take care of its people and all this other stuff. And the right out here, the conservatives, are screaming at him to denounce, the human rights tragedy. I mean,
they're literally here too. They're doubling down on saying, because what is the left's explanation for what's going on there? Well, the oil industry. Yeah, the oil industry is tanking. It's like, really, the oil industry is tanking. Yeah, we know that. So tell that to, I don't know, the Middle East,
Saudi Arabia, or
the entire Middle East is not collapsing. The UK.
Yeah, the UK
there's
has oil.
here
Trinidad and
too.
Tobago. Yeah, there's oil in the US. There's oil in my country of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, Trinidad and Tobago is bad. We're right next to Venezuela. And the Venezuelans are actually fleeing to our country. We have like a mini refugee crisis going on there. But we're not nearly as bad as all that's going on in Venezuela. We're right next door. And we have low oil prices. And oil accounts for like 40% of our GDP and all this other stuff. What's the difference? Yeah, we still have rule of law. We still have property rights.
We saw the whole thing of the Young Turks basically doubling down too, and they're trying to talk around the big issue that is socialism. And they're like, well, Maduro, he wasn't really smart when he instituted power to only his supporters, and he arrested all of his political opponents. It's like, dude,
Chavez did the same thing.
You're literally describing a dictatorship. You're literally describing the worst kind of government out there. Just shutting out human rights. And they're just like, it's not the best decision.
It's like he was an idiot. Oh, okay, that explains it.
It's not the best decision. I'm like, they're having such a hard time just going and saying, we were wrong, socialism's bad. Fuck Venezuela.
Venezuela's fucked. They've done it so many times. And, if you look at the history, not to go off track too much, even Argentina.
Right.
Back in the 1940s, Argentina and the United States were basically on par. Right? They were economically, they were doing fantastic.
Right.
To the point where Europeans leaving, it was like a choice. Well, what do you prefer? Do you want to go to Argentina or you want to go to the Americas? But then, of course, we got our socialist revolutions that take place in Argentina. And it has never recovered. It always goes through this cycle of, prosperity, and then these socialist ideas come in, economy collapses, they print money to get out of it, hyperinflation, they default on their debt, they reissue a new currency, and they do the whole thing all over again. And that's what Venezuela is going through. And it just seems like Latin America will not learn. They've been doing this for at least 50 years.
I think we should call this episode "The Left Doubles Down on Everything."
But more getting back to the point though, I think I was very concerned watching the feed, my Facebook feed and my Twitter feed when the Charlottesville stuff was going on, and people not understanding the implications to free speech. And this is actually kind of what I wanted to talk about with this whole topic before we went too far off the rails. I fully believe that free speech is the paramount issue on dealing with the left.
Mm-hmm.
And if it isn't, we don't stand up to that. And free speech advocates like Amos and myself know that means the likes of Richard Spencer, Nazis, white supremacists, black supremacists, Holocaust deniers, just the worst fathoms of humanity have a right to speak their mind.
Right.
And I think that is where these ideas should be exposed, challenged, and laughed at. So if Antifa had not showed up to the Charlottesville whole thing and caused the ruckus that they did, Richard Spencer and the few sprinkled Nazis and the alt-right, whatever, the whole thing would have gone off without a hitch. The media might have given it a page 6 in the New York Times, buried, below some car advertisements. And nobody would have cared. But the fact that they're now opposing and they're giving attention to these groups and so forth, and there's the potential for the whole martyrdom syndrome where people now view the alt-right as some kind of victim. They're just making this whole thing worse. And as we were discussing before, I just want to get this point that when the left, well, not just the left, because the right does it too, but when groups shut down the marketplace of ideas for moderate speech, like where people could sit down and say, well, okay, well, here are the arguments for the white nationalist movement, and I could agree with some parts and maybe disagree with some parts and stuff like that, and not have to automatically be labeled as a Nazi and all these other things. If people are just allowed to have the conversations and debate the ideas without being shut down, in the realm of moderate conversation, a lot of this stuff would be hashed out. But because we've silenced, the left has tried to silence, the right has tried to we've silenced the discourse where we're not allowed to speak about anything, even remotely racial, political, elsewhere. Even as you yourself said, like, you did not put anything on your Facebook. I agree. I didn't do anything either because I knew it would just be a shitstorm. But because we can't have that rational dialogue anymore in the realms of moderate ideas, the only voice that is left are the extremists.
Mm-hmm.
The only voice that is brave enough to speak up and say what they have to say are going to be the extreme voices. And those are the ones, unfortunately, that are going to gather the momentum and they're going to gather the support, because that's the only voice that's speaking.
Right.
That's what ends up happening. So for us, free speech is the key. And if it is that we don't stand up for that, I mean, I'm very disturbed that, like, I'm seeing this stuff go on YouTube, the censorship, the YouTube, you know, these algorithms are coming up, they're demonetizing and like shadow banning and all this other kind of crap. But if we're not allowed to have those debates online in the realm of moderate, rational, everyday people, we empower the extremists. And I think that, above everything else, is the most dangerous thing the most dangerous lesson out of the Charlottesville.
We were actually talking about this. This is kind of repeating the conversation Brooke and I had a few days ago, which was the fact that just imagine you kind of have these kind of using what's his name, Sam Harris's way of describing this when he talks about the concentric circles of sort of these people groups. You have the small circle. You have the KKK, neo-Nazi, white supremacists, the racists, the really, really hardcore. You've got maybe, I don't know, anywhere between a few thousand to maybe just above a couple tens of thousands of people. Maybe. Sure. I mean, I'm being really
I don't think it's that big. Yeah, go ahead. That's fine.
And then you have the other circle. You have the white nationalism. You have the people that possibly Richard Spencer's maybe on the inner side of that, but just wanting sort of this voluntary, non-violent sort of ethno-state. They believe in that. And then you have the concerned individuals. This is probably in a couple million. You have individuals now that have genuine concerns about the white race. They don't really know what to think. They're seeing just sort of this white culture. This sort of, I understand America's definitely. Yeah, I understand definitely America's a melting pot, and you know, people intermarry. That's totally fine.
Sure.
But these are individuals that are seeing that you just don't have. They're seeing the statistics. They see the numbers. They're seeing the white man, the white individual, the Caucasian male, the Caucasian person is just going to be smaller and smaller minority. It's just going to be mixed and muddled away. Which I'm reiterating the fact that I'm totally fine with all this. People go marry and have kids, whoever they want, whatever. Concerned individuals in maybe the couple millions, and then you have the rest of us.
Right.
Now, anywhere between that outer circle and the white nationalists, the left wants to shut out all of them. And these are your everyday individuals that you will come in contact with that maybe want to have a conversation, but because of the way that society is having this narrative push that they're not allowed to talk about it, that they're literally equating them to that smaller circle in the middle.
Yeah, correct.
Where they completely shut them out, and all that's left is these guys who are literally balls to the walls, don't give a fuck what you think. They're just gonna spew the toxicity to the max. They're gonna pull in all of this into there.
Correct.
Now instead of having maybe a few thousand, maybe 10,000 white supremacist, KKK, neo-Nazi people, it starts moving up into the hundreds of thousands, maybe even to the million. This is the worst case scenario, obviously, where free speech is essentially maybe not legally shut out. First Amendment stays in place, the whole thing, but in society, in sort of the sense of the de jure side. What is it? Is it de jure or is it de facto? De facto is what it is, right?
De facto. De jure is
Sorry, not de jure is law. Sorry. Sort of the de facto part of the de facto thing in society is you just don't talk.
The consciousness of society, yeah.
The consciousness of society will essentially shut out all of this to the point that you instead of having just like I said, a few thousand white supremacists, now you have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of them, because they're seeing this sort of mentality that their ideas are not being challenged. Because here, can take for a moment that I'm just one of those concerned individuals about the white race, and I'm watching TV, I'm watching my media, I'm seeing the newspaper, social media, YouTube, and I see that in this marketplace of ideas that is being essentially choked on, is I'm not seeing sort of a lot of the extreme at first, but then that's all I see is the extreme. So I see the extreme, but I don't get to have that discussion. So there's nothing to go against that. There's no discussion. So I start to see more and more of the extreme, and I can either go extreme left or extreme right, or alt right, alt left. And there's nothing to stop the people. Unfortunately, the masses are easily influenced by this, and what happens is there's nothing to check and balance out my views. Here I am having some slight concerns about America, the white race, and everything. And what happens is somewhere down the line, nothing is challenging me, and everything is saying all my concerns are right, and all my concerns have to be acted upon.
Right.
See?
Exactly.
Down the line, now there's millions of me out there that are like, no one cared about my concerns. Everything seems to point to say that I'm justified in my concerns. And there's nothing to argue against that. There's no free marketplace of ideas to exchange for me to learn, to be informed. At least in the mainstream. I can go and be informed if I want to, but the common man probably doesn't really care to be that much more informed than what he absorbs on a daily basis.
Correct.
So this is the issue of free speech, is if you shut out all this, like you said, the moderate speech, you're only left with the extreme speech. So you're going to hear because even moderate leftism is shut out at times too.
Yeah, classical liberalism was the target of the Antifa.
Yeah, classical liberalism is now thrown out. If you're, what is it? Anything obviously right of center is immediately shut out. And then anything slightly left of center is shut out too.
Yeah. So basically everything left of center is shut out as Nazism and like alt-right, even the left. And the only thing that is left is the extreme left. And that is progressivism.
And the extreme right that just doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah. So they've roped them all. Like I actually posted about the Robert E. Lee Confederate statue that was pulled down. It was in Charlottesville as well. And there was a football game, I think, with University of Virginia. And ESPN chose not to allow one of their commentators, who happened to be named Robert Lee,
Asian man,
to go and participate in it. And he's Asian, right? He was he was pulled because of the close association of his name, right? Now I posted that article on my Facebook as a kind of like this is real horseshit. Like this is people are retarded. And even one of my guys in Trinidad and Tobago, who's very liberal, he commented and said, look, there's stupidity and then there's this, right? Like this is a level beyond stupidity, right?
Right.
And I agreed with him. I said, yeah, the problem is that this, whatever you want to call it, is becoming way too common. And then he makes the comment, which kind of showed me that he himself didn't understand it. He said, this is why people think that liberals are soft. Because even in his understanding as a liberal, as what would be considered a classical liberal, he didn't understand the distinction that this is not left. This is not even liberal. This is just, I mean, totalitarian kind of thinking where we need to erase any kind of, image or any kind of association with the possibility of the Confederate General of General Lee, however many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That's pandering, and it's condescending to people. It's basically saying that they cannot handle an Asian sports announcer named Robert Lee because they're so fragile and so easily offended that, just his presence and his name there is going to cause problems. And I mean, it's the soft bigotry of low expectations, as we've discussed.
Right. I mean, the you know about like the whole did you know about the Ben Affleck thing when he learned about his ancestry?
No, I didn't.
So Ben Affleck, everyone knows, Good Will Hunting,
the actor, yeah,
the new Batman, that whole thing. So he obviously was his, yeah, he had his whole fiasco with Sam Harris on Bill Maher about the whole Muslim thing, and he was just so dense that he couldn't catch the nuance of bad ideas, the difference between a bad idea and the religion of Islam itself, and separating it out and seeing that there are bad ideas within Islam. So he's flipping out and just saying it's racist, it's bigoted, and it's intolerant. And there was some show where like celebrities would go on to this show, and they were I forgot what it was called, but basically he went on the show to sort of allow his ancestry to be dug up. So you saw, I think like Anderson Cooper was on there once, Ben Affleck was on there another time. So here's what happened. So Ben Affleck has his genetics. They pull his genetics. They're looking at his ancestry. And they said, okay, we found you. Like, your family was definitely in America for a long time. Let's see here. Oh, you have an ancestor that was a slave owner.
Right.
And he lost it. I think he was like threatening to sue them to pull that episode, to cut that out. And I mean, he was like devastated because this, I mean, the white guilt, the white guilt. He couldn't even accept that an ancestor was a slave. It's like he thought like just in this line of human progression that he had. I mean, back in the caveman, they were always perfect, enlightened individuals that did not commit any violence, did not commit any human atrocity. I mean, what is it? You talk about every 1 in 200 people has a little bit of genetics of Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
So is that
Genghis Khan had it going on.
So is that 1 in 200 person, like, is that person then now just immediately associated with being a warmongering, world dominating individual? What's this now? Oh, is that the genetics kit or whatever?
Yeah, speaking of genetics, right? So this is like, I'm not being paid for this. I don't know if you could see that or not. It's upside down. Right, so...
Oh.
Right, I actually got the genetic kit to do like the whole test and stuff like that. Anybody who's interested in that, my entire ancestry going back for 400 years is online. We've actually researched it back on myheritage.com and stuff. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it because I know I'm like a hodgepodge of everything, right? It probably the running joke is probably not East Indian, but I'm working on that apparently.
Right. So yeah, like it just goes to show like where. Yeah, I mean,
this is something we've tackled a lot in our preacher days. At least I did. Because this bullshit of the genetic fallacy, right? And that's what it is. It's a genetic fallacy. So suggesting that at some point in the past, something happened that has some kind of relevant connection to today when it's separated by generations and other things.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, right? It's just nonsensical. So a lot of people like do that with the whole advent of Christmas, for instance, as being a pagan holiday. That once upon a time it was celebrated by pagans, and then it was Christianized when the Europeans came across. But technically, it's still pagan. And we shouldn't celebrate it because, Christianity really didn't change anything and all this other kinds of stuff, right? I mean, if that was true, then everything that happened in the caveman days would still be standard, right? That would be like the default premise of everything that happens today.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's the logic of saying that, okay, say Abraham, the founder of most of the the three major monolithic faiths, he was originally a Gentile, although some people will disagree. And, according to the biblical stand, he became the first Jew. He was the one appointed, he was circumcised and all this other stuff. And he created the bloodline and the line of the children of Israel. But a genetic fallacy will say, well, no, he was originally a Gentile, so he's still a Gentile today, and all Jews are therefore Gentiles. That's the logic behind it, right?
Right.
So for people like, as you say, Ben Affleck to come up with this nonsense and not recognize themselves as an individual, which is the problem. They are collectivists. They cannot see themselves as autonomous. And again, everything has to be connected, to these racial issues and all this other nonsense.
It almost seems that they're extremely insecure.
Right. They have, well, especially the actors. I mean, your whole role in life is to play somebody else. If that doesn't say something about your mental state, I don't know what does.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that's I didn't know.
That's just messed up. That's just messed up. Yeah, because he was, well, at least in the Bible. I think the Quran has a different reading, but I don't remember what it is. But the Bible, he was called out of the people of Ur, and he was an idol maker, and he was called out, and that's when God set him apart and said he'll make of him a great nation and all this stuff. And he was the founder of technically the three largest monotheist faiths. Right. So the genetic fallacy goes back to, like, you see it a lot with remember when they had the ALS ice bucket challenge?
Mm-hmm.
Did you do that? I can't remember. Did you do that?
I know what you're getting at. I didn't do it, actually.
Right. You didn't do it? Oh, you pussy.
Remember, no, remember. No, here's the thing.
Right.
When I was still with that one person, she had friends that were doing it, and she was hoping for one of them, because you couldn't just do it, apparently. You had to get challenged. She never got challenged, because she was like, if I got challenged, I'm challenging you. And I'm like, okay, great, we'll do it.
Right.
And we never did. So that was that.
You never got challenged? Oh, I did it. Anybody, and the 4 people I challenged, I actually challenged 4 people. None of them did it. They all wussed out.
Yeah, you didn't even challenge me.
Because I wanted to challenge, as many people as I could, because you're only supposed to do 3. I did 4. And I was trying to get everybody in there because I thought it would have done the rounds.
Right.
But anyway, that's besides the point. But when that came out, and it was a silly challenge. It was to raise money and awareness for ALS research. A lot of people got into the whole thing, and then at one point it became ridiculous, where people were saying, well, the ice bucket challenge is connected somehow to slavery, and that they used to dunk the slaves into ice water, and therefore the ice bucket challenge is an homage to slavery. Now, never mind that there's over 100 years separation between the actions of slave owners and people in the internet age dunking themselves in ice water for an ALS cause.
At least.
Right? Never mind that. But this is a perfect example of the genetic fallacy. That what somebody else did before has no bearing, nothing to do with what we do now. If that was the case, I have bad news for you. Hitler used to breathe air. He used to eat food. And he'd drink water. Therefore, everybody today is Hitler.
Holding my breath.
Go for it, man. that is actually the lunacy of this kind of thinking of all this stuff.
The genetic fallacy, yeah.
The genetic fallacy. That's what it's called.
Jeez.
That's crazy, man. How? Yeah.
Are we on time?
I don't know how we do. I think we got 5 more minutes.
Five more minutes if we want. Or we can go longer. So, man, I mean, yeah, we missed quite a bit of stuff. There's definitely a lot going on, and I have no doubt there's going to be plenty more going on over the next how long do we got? 3 years at least of this term.
Yeah.
I mean, that is if he doesn't run for re-election.
That's if he's the rumors are he might resign. Apparently, I don't think that's true. I think the left media is wishing, hopefully.
Oh, they want him to resign. And that's what I don't get is they want him to resign, but then they're like, well, Mike Pence is even worse, and it's like, Mike Pence might have shittier views,
Right.
Apparently, I don't know. I haven't looked too much into him.
I don't really know much about him.
But then, what do you think he's really going to do? Like,
like what can he do? Like this was the argument I had with the person you had the confrontation with, that he really believes that at any minute Trump is going to release the National Guard and start rounding people up into concentration camps and like gassing people and all kinds of nonsense.
I mean, yeah, I mean, Hitler's New Germany, the Fourth Reich is going to happen
The
like
Fourth
tomorrow.
Reich.
The Fourth Reich.
Yeah, this is, and he really believes that's going to happen in the United States at any minute. And I try to, I sit back and kind of think to myself, that is impossible.
And this person is more knowledgeable in politics than I am, at least. Not so much that like ideology-wise, there's definitely flaws, but this person is a lot more knowledgeable than I am on things, and sure. it just really bothers me that they would actually think and they fall for the hysteria that this is the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just some businessman that comes into the presidency that just has a very, and I've talked to people about this. Actually, I spoke with an individual while working, and they were from New York actually, and they said when they see someone like Trump, they go, "Oh yeah, he's a New Yorker. This is how he talks."
Yeah,
they totally. Like the rest of the country does not get that because New York is such a for people they're very brash. They're very intense people. They talk a certain way that's very different from the rest of the country. That's why the rest of the country doesn't get it.
Correct. Correct.
But I mean that's one point of the it's one way of looking at how he is. But to think that this man is capable of doing what he's doing, people talk about democracy and the failure of it. Democracy failed in Germany because it was democracy. Democracy will not fail in America because we're not a democracy.
You're a republic.
We're a republic. Exactly. Democratic processes. Because if America was truly a democracy from the beginning, there'd be a lot of things that'd be very different. Because any majority-held ideal will stay that way until the majority is shifted.
Correct.
Slavery probably would have gone on longer because that was a majority ideal for a long time.
Correct.
The Republic allowed the smaller voices in that issue to come out and reject it. Sort of present their moral argument against and say, hey, this is not good because this and this. Things like, what is the majority in this country? Like racism could continue on a lot longer. Racist laws could go on a lot longer because we're majority white people.
Correct. So
just
to explain the difference though for people who may not know, the democracy side is direct democracy, meaning the majority dictates whatever the policy is. A republic, on the other hand, has a constitution, which is the highest law of the land, and thereby the constitution, everything that is done has to fit within the purview of the constitution. So the American system, unlike us in the UK, we actually don't have a codified constitution. We're like one of 3 countries in the world that don't have one, right? Israel, New Zealand, and the UK. We are very much like a democracy where the party in power kind of dictates what it is, and we don't have a constitution to restrain it, which is why we have censorship laws and all of this other kind of nonsense.
Right.
So that's the explanation.
What's tricky? So basically, like I guess to go further is just a republic tends to because there's parameters set in place. Those parameters are set in such a way that allow that not only protect the majority but also protect the minority. People want to go argue the popular vote. Hillary won the popular vote, but Trump won the electoral vote because that's how it's actually set up. Is because you have issues because if it was a pure democratic process in that way and there was just popular vote along the whole way, the presidential candidates would only have to they would just send out a crew and just say, okay, we're most of the voters, what kind of ideologies do they like, and we're just going to go there and just get all of them to like us.
Yeah.
And we win because we went to
New York and California, right?
Yeah, they'll campaign in in a few cities instead of the electoral college
The
forces them to
flyover
campaign.
countries.
Yeah,
The flyover
and they
states.
said all that with complete denial of the fact that the way the electoral college works is it makes you have to go to pretty much all the cities, all the major cities across the country to campaign because it is. I mean, it truly puts candidates to work to win the vote.
Yeah,
Which I
for
think
the whole country.
It's better that way. And
I agree.
whereas instead of just, okay, we're just going to go to these few cities, win the vote, and what is the rest of the country going to feel like? They're just going to feel like, well, what's the point?
Yeah. I mean, if everything was dictated by California, Texas, Florida, and New York, I'm pretty sure the other states would have something to say about that.
Yeah. And anyway, so yeah, that's the big difference, and it flies in the face of this idea that we're democracy, and because they tend to think, well, democracy went south in, like, we'll pride ourselves on a democracy by saying where we have the freedom to vote and things like that, but then when it doesn't suit their purpose, they'll turn it around and say, well, democracy failed in Germany, so it's going to fail here. Well, thank God we don't have a democracy.
Right, exactly.
I mean,
right? And even
on one hand, yeah. On one hand,
the
it's
circumstances
unfortunate.
in the US are totally different.
Right.
You're nowhere near post World War I Germany to even consider anything like that happening.
Right. On one hand, it's an unfortunate fact that because we have a republic in place, because our system is so tightly knit, that it doesn't allow for any major shifts and change.
Correct.
That kind of sucks. But on the other hand, it also keeps things from going south so fast that the people can't do anything about it.
Correct.
The system can't check itself in, keep itself in check. Trump can't.
That's not a bad thing. I don't think government not doing much is not necessarily a bad thing. Right?
Government not doing much is definitely not a bad thing. But I mean, then if government has too much power, it takes longer to dismantle that power instead of just cut it all out tomorrow.
Correct. That is a good point.
Like, for those of you who maybe have followed, I was actually telling Brooke about this. I was watching the Joe Rogan Experience and his interview with
hold on a second. Hi, Sandra. I'm in a call. I'll talk to you in a bit. Sorry, man.
No, it's all good. No, I was talking about. I mentioned to you about the Gary Johnson interview on the Joe Rogan Experience. Joe Rogan, actually, funny thing, he was with another guest later on, and he said, "Yeah, I had Gary Johnson." And he goes, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I voted for him." He said, "Yeah, I told Gary Johnson, come on the show and I'll vote for you."
Really? Oh, awesome.
So he came on, and they had like I think 2.5-hour discussion, and I mean, what I like Gary Johnson's ideas. I like what he wants to do. The federal consumption tax, these sort of things. He wanted to dismantle the IRS. I think even the NSA, or no, not the NSA. Well, he was either NSA or Homeland Security. I think. No, the Homeland Security, I think it's like an executive order. But just there was all sorts of executive orders he wanted to shut down. He wanted to dismantle the power of the president because the power of the president has been been built to. It's overreaching, really. I mean, there's still checks and balances to keep him from doing things, but it's allowed. I think there's definitely an abuse of just the president's power. So, anyways, he wanted to abolish the IRS and instate the federal consumption tax, just all these different things. And he had a very good way of explaining why all this makes sense to him, why the theory definitely can work. But unfortunately, even if he did become president, a lot of that probably won't happen right away.
Correct, because he still has to work with Congress.
Because he still has to work with a lot of things. I mean, he said he made it work as a governor. I think he said he vetoed probably more legislation than all of the other governors combined.
Probably.
Or pretty darn close, because he was just like, we're doing this, or I'm not signing it. So, let's see here. Yeah. So, yeah, shit's crazy, man. No, we got a lot of catching up to do on a lot of this stuff that's going on, but you know, we've gotten. Thank God that Trump didn't do anything too stupid yet.
Yeah, exactly. And this is actually something I'm concerned about. Is, you know, the media hysteria surrounding Trump is, I mean, it's just off the charts at this point. But if he does anything really stupid, like if he really did something that actually warranted this level of criticism, nobody would know. Nobody would take it on. It's like the boy that called wolf, for those who might know the story, right? You know, the media has just gone completely, you know, ape shit about everything that he's doing, and everything he's doing is, of course, like literally gassing the Jews and literally Hitler and all this other nonsense. Like, if he actually did something that really screwed it up, it would just be echo. It would just be more noise in the background of the chamber that nobody would actually pay attention to. That is the concern.
Yeah, they've pushed the hysteria to such a degree that when something actually is going to happen, they would have essentially discredited themselves because they have talked themselves out of relevance.
Yeah, exactly. That is my concern.
Yeah.
It's just nonsense, man. But how are we doing on time, man? I mean, yeah, we're doing all right.
We're a little over, but I mean, we've been gone for so long.
Yeah. No, I think we call it there, man. I actually do have a couple of things I want to get done, and the roommate has just come in here, and she wants to have a chat, so I gotta run.
Sounds good. Well, thanks everyone for joining us for the stream today. Let us know what you guys want us to, you know, talk about. Let us know in the comments. Follow both of us on Twitter. We'll be posting all the social media info in the description below. Also subscribe to our channels. I know Brook did a couple videos in his absence. I know I got to do some more videos. So thanks for joining us today, guys. We will see you later.
Thanks again, guys. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.